Not every journey begins by choice. They say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and every survivor has a story worth hearing. We say it also makes for a really good podcast. I'm Ralph Watkins, author of 10 Habits of Shit Creek Survivors and founder of the National Association of Shit Creek Survivors. This is the Shit Creek Survivor Podcast. Let's start paddling. Well, hello and welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to be here with you. And in case you're not aware of this, you just tuned in or whatever, this is the first ever episode of the Shit Creek Survivor Podcast. All right, so you are here at day one, step one, ground zero, as it were. Now, before we dive into the survivor stories, okay, and trust me, they're coming. Okay, and they're gonna wreck you in the best possible way. I wanted to make sure you have the full picture. See, because this podcast was built around, or is being built around, real interviews with real people who have been through real hell. But somewhere along the way, we realized that without understanding the framework that helped them to survive, well, the stories may be inspiring, but honestly, a little incomplete. So here's what we're doing. Okay, these early episodes, we're going to walk you through the 10 habits of Shit Creek survivors, one by one. We'll be giving you the context, the why, the human truth behind each one, sharing a real-life survivor story attached to each one of these. So that way, whether you've read the book or maybe you've never heard of it until even just right now, but by the time we get to our first survivor interview, you'll have the compass in your hand. All right, so think of this as the orientation before the expedition, because the stories hit different when you understand the map. All right, so this is the Shit Creek Survivor Podcast, and let's start pedaling. So, you know that old saying about being up Shit Creek without a paddle, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that something that might surprise you, and that is the paddle was never the point. So I've been there. I'm standing in the middle of my own personal Shit Creek, right? Watching everything that I thought I knew about life swirl down the drain. My business had collapsed. My marriage was being severely tested. I was broke. I was broken and convinced that I had somehow monumentally screwed up the one shot I had at this thing called life. So, hey, maybe you're there right now. Maybe you're reading this in the middle of the night because you can't sleep. Right? Not with the weight of the crisis or whatever you're facing pressing down on your chest like it's a concrete slab. And maybe you've already Googled how to survive everything how to survive when everything falls apart more times than you care to admit. Or maybe you've already made it through your Shit Creek moment. You survived, but you're still trying to figure out what in the world just happened and how to make sure you never find yourself there again. So here's what I learned. Shit Creek isn't a place you accidentally wander into. It's not a punishment for doing something wrong, and it absolutely isn't the end of your story. Shit Creek is a crucible. It's where ordinary people are forged into something stronger, wiser, and even more resilient than they ever imagined possible. The survivors among us. So, this book isn't about me, though. It's about the remarkable people that I discovered while I was drowning in my own struggles. People who had faced circumstances so dire, so impossibly difficult, that my problems looked like a walk in the park by comparison. I'm talking about Malala Yousafzai, who took a bullet to the head for the crime, right, of wanting an education, and came back fighting harder than ever. Viktor Frankl, who, if you've read his book, right, he survived the Nazi death camps and emerged with insights about human resilience that would change psychology forever. Elizabeth Smart, she was kidnapped at 14 and held captive for 9 months. And she transformed her trauma into a mission to help others. Here's the thing. These aren't just inspiring stories to make you feel better, although they might do that too, right? These are case studies in survival. They're proof that the human spirit can endure and even thrive in conditions that should, by all measures, destroy it. But here's the thing that kept me up at night as I researched these stories. What do these survivors know that I didn't? Right? What habits, mindsets, or practices allowed them not just to survive their personal hells, but to emerge from them with purpose, with meaning, and with hope? So that question became an obsession, and I started looking for patterns. So I interviewed survivors from many kinds of crises, right? Financial ruin, devastating illness, loss of loved ones, right? A lot of us have had that. Natural disasters, abuse of all kinds, and addictions. So I read widely on studies on resilience, post-traumatic growth, and human adaptability. And slowly, a framework emerged. So I noticed 10 specific habits that showed up again and again in the stories of these people who didn't just survive Shit Creek. They learned to navigate it, to grow from it, and sometimes, to even be grateful for it. So, all right, why Shit Creek? Well, before we go any further, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the profanity in the title. I know some people are going to be offended by the language. They'll say it's crude, unprofessional, or unnecessary. And you know what? Hey, they may be right. There are plenty of gentler ways to describe life-altering crises, right? We could call them challenging times, or difficult circumstances, or periods of adversity. But here's why I chose Shit Creek. Because that's what it feels like when you're in it. Hey, when your world is falling apart, you don't need polite euphemisms. You need raw honesty. You need someone to look you in the eye and go, yeah, this is terrible. This is as bad as it feels. You're not overreacting. The phrase Shit Creek captures something that clinical language never could. It's that visceral, terrifying, utterly overwhelming feel of being in crisis. It's the difference between reading a medical description about drowning and actually having water fill your lungs. So, look, if the language bothers you, I get it. And, I'm sorry about that. But I'm betting that if you're reading this book, that if you're here, right, you are not here for comfort. You're here for real. So, what this book is and isn't. All right, so let me be clear about what you're holding in your hands right now. This is not a book about positive thinking. I'm not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason, or that your crisis is secretly a blessing in disguise. Sometimes terrible things happen for no reason at all. Yeah, and they genuinely suck. Okay, but this is not a book about bouncing back. The goal here isn't to return to who you were before your crisis hit. That person is gone. And trying to resurrect them is a waste of energy. The goal is to become someone new, someone forged by fire and tempered by adversity. So, this is not a book that promises easy answers. This does not promise easy answers. The 10 habits we're going to explore require work, courage, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. These are not hacks or shortcuts. They're practices that will challenge you. Okay, so what is this book? This is a survival manual for the worst moments of your life. It's a guide to the specific, researched back, battle-tested habits that will help you not just endure crisis, but transform it into a catalyst for growth. So each chapter in here, we call them the habits, right? Each chapter explores one habit through the lens of a real survivor's story. So you'll see how that habit played out in their journey through hell, what the research says about why it works, and most importantly, how you can develop that habit in your own life, starting today. So the 10 habits. Here's a preview of what we'll cover. Habit 1, embracing adaptability. This is how Malala Yousafzai how her ability to pivot and adjust turned a bullet meant to silence her into a platform that amplified her voice to millions. Habit 2 is practicing radical acceptance. Viktor Frankl, his discovery that accepting what we cannot change is not defeat. It's the first step toward freedom. Habit 3, seeking meaning in suffering. So Elizabeth Smart's journey to transform her trauma into purpose, and why finding meaning matters more than finding happiness. Habit 4, building a support network. How J.K. Rowling's willingness to accept help during her darkest days made all the difference between giving up and creating a literary empire. Habit 5, maintaining disciplined routines. This is Nelson Mandela's 27-year masterclass in using structure and routine to preserve sanity, dignity, and hope in the most dehumanizing conditions possible. Habit 6, cultivating gratitude. Corrie ten Boom's shocking practice of thanking God for the fleas in her concentration camp barracks and the unexpected protection that it provided. Habit 7, embracing vulnerability. This is Bill Wilson's story of how admitting weakness and asking for help became his greatest strength in recovery. Habit 8, developing problem-solving grit. This is Aaron Ralston's 127-hour ordeal trapped in a canyon and the methodical approach that saved his life when hope seemed impossible. Habit 9, prioritizing self-compassion. This is Oprah Winfrey's journey from self-blame to self-acceptance, and why being kind to yourself is not a weakness, but wisdom. Habit 10, committing to lifelong learning. So Frederick Douglass taught himself to read in secret at a time when literacy for an enslaved person was punishable by death. That single, defiant commitment to learning became the foundation of his freedom, his voice, and ultimately his legacy as one of the most powerful advocates for human dignity in American history. Then we have a bonus habit, drawing strength from personal faith. This is Martin Pistorius' 12-year journey trapped inside his own body, sustained by faith that transcended his circumstances. All right, so how do we use this book? Here's the thing. You don't have to read this book cover to cover. Hey, if you're in crisis right now, you can jump to whichever chapter, whichever habit speaks to your current need. You're drowning in circumstances you can't control? Start with habit 2. That's radical acceptance. Feeling isolated and alone? Hey, go straight to habit 4, building a support network. So each chapter is designed to stand alone while also building on the others. So the habits work together, creating a framework of resilience that's truly greater than the sum of the parts. And here, at the end of each chapter, you'll find key takeaways. So the essential lessons distilled into little memorable bullet points. You'll find reflection questions. So it prompts you to examine your own life and crisis through the lens of that habit. And then, most importantly, we have action steps. So these are specific, practical exercises you can start today. Not someday, not when you feel better, but right now. So I encourage you to do those exercises. Hey, resistance is natural. Your brain will tell you they're too simple, or they're too hard, or they're not relevant in your situation. Hey, do them anyway. Transformation doesn't happen through understanding alone. It happens through practice. So here's a quick word about hope, and this is one more thing before we dive in. If you're in the middle of your shit creek moment right now, you might not have much hope. You might be reading this out of desperation rather than optimism. Hey, that's okay. You don't need hope to start. You just need to be willing to turn the page. So hope isn't something you conjure up through willpower. It's something that sneaks up on you when you're busy doing the work of surviving. It is a byproduct of practice, but it's not a prerequisite for it. At some point, most of us end up in a place we never planned to be. A job gone, a relationship shattered, a life that looks nothing like the one we imagined. A lot of people call it Shit Creek, and I wrote a map for getting out. The 10 Habits of Shit Creek Survivors is a field guide built not from theory, but from the real stories of 11 people who lost everything and found their way back. If you're in that current right now, or if you know someone who is, grab your copy at NASCS.org. The map exists. You just have to pick it up. The people whose stories fill this book didn't start with hope. They started with pain, fear, and desperation. Hope came later, earned through the daily practice of these 10 habits. So, hey, if you're reading this with no hope at all, that's fine. Borrow mine for now. I've seen these habits work in my own life and in the lives of many others, so I know that they can work for you too. Remember, your Shit Creek moment doesn't define you, but how you navigate it does. So here's a quick note. Before you dive in, I want to say something simple. This book was not written from a position of having it all figured out. It was written from a position of, well, being completely lost and slowly, imperfectly, finding the way back. So every survivor in these pages faced something truly I can't fully imagine. And yet, when I studied their stories, I kept seeing the same patterns emerge, the same habits, the same quiet, stubborn refusal to let the worst moment become the final moment. That's what this book is about. Because these stories belong to all of us. So I hope something in these pages meets you exactly where you are. Habit 1, embracing adaptability. Stop fighting the wave and learn to surf it. Featured survivor, Malala Yousafzai. On October 9th of 2012, a 15-year-old girl boarded her school bus in Pakistan's Swat Valley, excited about an upcoming exam. Minutes later, a masked gunman stepped onto the bus, asked, "Who is Malala?" and then shot her in the head at point-blank range. The Taliban had tried to silence her permanently. They failed spectacularly. Today, Malala Yousafzai is the youngest Nobel Prize laureate in history, a global advocate for girls' education, and one of the most recognized voices for human rights in the world. That bullet that was meant to end her story, instead, amplified it to reach millions. But here is what most people miss when they hear Malala's story. Her resilience wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about being adaptable. So, what is adaptability? Adaptability is the ability to adjust your thoughts, your emotions, and behaviors in response to changing circumstances. It's not about abandoning your values or giving up on your goals. It's about finding new paths when the old ones are blocked. So, think of water. Water doesn't fight the obstacles in its path. No, it flows around them, or over them, or sometimes through them. It adapts its shape to fill whatever container it finds itself in, and yet it never stops being water. That's the essence of adaptability. In Malala's case, adaptability looked like this. She couldn't return to Pakistan safely, so she continued her advocacy from London. She couldn't attend school in Swat Valley, so she used her global platform to bring education to millions of other girls. The Taliban took away her old life, so she built a new one, bigger, more impactful, more aligned with her deepest values than anything she could have imagined before. Here's what's cool. Adaptability isn't plan B. It's the habit that allows you to find plans C through Z when A and B fell apart. So here's Malala's story from Swat Valley to the world stage. So to understand Malala's adaptability, we need to understand what she lost. She grew up in Mingora, the main city in Pakistan's Swat Valley. Her father ran a school. And from an early age, Malala was passionate about education, not as a privilege, but as a fundamental right. When the Taliban took control of Swat Valley in 2007, they began systematically shutting down girls' schools. And by 2009, they had banned female education entirely. So most 15-year-olds would have accepted this reality, however unjust. But Malala didn't. At 11 years old, she began writing a blog for BBC Urdu under a pseudonym and documenting life under the Taliban rule and advocating for girls' right to education. As she grew older and more outspoken, well, she became a target. Her family received death threats regularly. Pakistani intelligence warned her father that she was in danger. Still, she continued speaking out. Then came October 9th of 2012. The bullet entered just above her left eye, traveled through her brain, lodged in her shoulder. The Taliban spokesman later said that they targeted her because she was promoting Western thinking and secularism. Malala was airlifted to a hospital in Birmingham, England, where the doctors placed her in a medically induced coma. She woke up a week later, thousands of miles from home, unable to move the left side of her face, with a piece of her skull temporarily removed to allow her brain to swell. In that time, everything had changed. Her old life, school in Swat Valley, the daily routines with family and friends, the ability to walk down her own street safely, that was all gone. The attack had made her one of the most recognizable faces in the world. So returning to Swat Valley would mean living under the constant threat of another assassination attempt. This is the moment where adaptability becomes crucial. So, the first adaptation, accepting the new reality. Malala's first act of adaptability was accepting that she couldn't go back to her old life. And that's not wouldn't, it's couldn't. In an interview after the attack, she's been remarkably honest about this. She said, quoting, "I used to think that the Talib would come and he would just kill me. But then I said, if he comes, what would you do to Malala? Then I would reply to myself, Malala, just take a shoe and hit him. But then I said, but if you hit a Talib with your shoe, there would be no difference between you and the Talib. You must not treat others with cruelty and treat them harshly. You must treat others through peace and through dialogue and through education." Hey, this was not naive idealism. It was strategic adaptability. Malala understood that meeting violence with violence would make her exactly like her attackers. It would also make her message about peace and education ring hollow. But accepting the impossibility of her old life didn't mean giving up on her mission. It meant finding new ways to pursue it. So, here's the second adaptation, transforming personal trauma into a global platform. Here's where Malala's adaptability becomes truly remarkable. So she could have retreated from public life. Hey, she paid the price for speaking out, nearly dying for it. Nobody would have blamed her for focusing on her recovery, finishing school quietly, and building a private life away from the spotlight. Instead, she did the opposite. She used global attention her story had generated to amplify the message that had nearly gotten her killed. On her 16th birthday, less than 9 months after the shooting, Malala addressed the United Nations. Quoting, she said, "The terrorists thought they would change my aims and stop my ambitions. But nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage were born." Notice the framing? She didn't say, "I'm back to my old self." She said, "Something changed. Fear died. Courage was born." She adapted to her new reality by becoming someone new, something forged by trauma, but not defined by it. This is crucial. Malala didn't try to return to the person she was before the attack. She couldn't. That version of herself had been irrevocably altered by a bullet. Instead, she adapted by evolving into someone who could carry her message even further than before. Here's the third adaptation, using new resources in a new context. So when Malala woke up in Birmingham, she had lost access to the resources of her old life, her community in Swat Valley, her daily routines, the familiar context of her activism. But she gained new resources, global media attention, a platform that reached millions, access to world leaders and international organizations, and the opportunity to get a world-class education in England. A less adaptable person might have mourned what was lost and failed to recognize what was gained. Malala did both. So she grieved her old life while strategically leveraging her new circumstances. She enrolled in school in Birmingham. She launched the Malala Fund, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to girls' education worldwide. She wrote a best-selling memoir. She became the youngest person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and that was at age 17. Hey, none of this was her original plan. This wasn't the life she imagined when she started blogging at 11 years old. But when her circumstances changed dramatically and irreversibly, she adapted her approach while staying true to her core mission. So here's the science of adaptability. Malala's story illustrates adaptability in action. But what does the research tell us about why this habit matters so much for survival? Well, Dr. George Bonanno, a clinical psychologist at Columbia University, has spent decades studying resilience. His research reveals something counterintuitive. The most resilient people aren't the ones who are the toughest or the most rigid in the face of adversity. They're the ones who are the most flexible. In a landmark study, Bonanno found that people who could express both positive and negative emotions, people who could laugh at a funeral, I've done that, or cry while celebrating, recovered from loss more quickly than those who tried to maintain a single emotional stance. Adaptability, he discovered, isn't about being strong enough to never bend. It's about being flexible enough to bend without breaking. Neurologically, adaptability is linked to something called cognitive flexibility, the brain's ability to switch between different concepts or to think about multiple concepts simultaneously. Studies using fMRI scans show that people with higher cognitive flexibility have more active prefrontal cortexes, the part of the brain responsible for executive function and complex problem solving. Here's what's encouraging. Cognitive flexibility can be developed. So this is not a fixed trait that you either have or don't have. Like a muscle, it gets stronger with practice. Dr. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, identifies flexible thinking as one of the core components of learned optimism. In his research, people who can generate multiple explanations for setbacks and multiple solutions for problems report higher life satisfaction and recover from adversity more quickly than those who get stuck in rigid thinking patterns. So here's why adaptability matters in Shit Creek. Because when you're in crisis, your world has changed. Hey, maybe you lost your job, or your health, or an important relationship, your home, or even someone you love. The life you had, the plans you made, the future you envisioned, they're gone or fundamentally altered. So you have two choices. Choice one, refuse to adapt. Insist that things should be the way they were. Spend your energy fighting reality, demanding that circumstances return to normal, whatever that was, or waiting for everything to go back to how it used to be. By the way, this approach is emotionally understandable, but it's also a recipe for prolonged suffering. Choice two, adapt. Accept that your circumstances have changed. Grieve what you lost, and then ask yourself, given this new reality, what's possible now? What new paths are available to me? How can I move forward toward my values and my goals from here? You don't have to figure this out alone. The National Association of Shit Creek Survivors was built on one simple truth. Connection is the best medicine for the struggle. Take the 10 Habits assessment, get your personalized survival profile, and find the people who have already navigated the waters you're in right now. Your tribe is waiting at NASCS.org. Come find your paddle. So, very important. This doesn't mean that you're happy about the change. It doesn't mean that you caused it or deserved it. It just means you're working with reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Malala couldn't return to Swat Valley. Fighting reality wouldn't have changed it. It would have just kept her stuck in bitterness and frustration. Instead, she adapted. She found new ways to pursue her mission from where she was. Here's what's awesome. You can do the same. So here's the adaptability mindset, and here's 3 core beliefs. Through my own personal research into survivors like Malala and many others, I've identified 3 core beliefs that adaptable people share. Number 1, my circumstances have changed, but my values remain. Adaptable people distinguish between their circumstances, which are often beyond their control, and their values, which they can always choose to honor regardless of circumstances. Malala's circumstances changed completely after the shooting, but her core value, that education is the fundamental right for every child, that never wavered. She just found new ways to live that value in her new circumstances. So when you're in crisis, ask yourself, what do I value most? How can I honor those values in my current situation, even if it looks different than before? All right, here's core belief number 2. There's always more than one path forward. So rigid thinking sees only one right way to do things. Adaptable thinking recognizes multiple possibilities. Malala could have seen only one path, return to Pakistan and resume her old life. When that became impossible, she could have concluded that her mission was over. Instead, she recognized that there were countless other ways to advocate for girls' education. When you're stuck, ask yourself, what are 3 other ways that I could approach this? What would I suggest to a friend in this situation? And what would happen if my preferred solution became impossible? What would I do then? 3rd core belief, adaptation is not defeat. This might be the most important belief because many people resist adapting because they see it as giving up or admitting defeat. Malala didn't defeat the Taliban by getting shot and surviving. She defeated them by refusing to let violence silence her message. Adaptation was not surrender, it was strategy. So when you adapt to your circumstances, you're not admitting that what happened is okay or is fair. You're not giving up on your goals or betraying your values. You're being smart enough to recognize that fighting reality is a waste of energy that could be better spent finding a new path forward. So there's a few common adaptability obstacles. I mean, if adaptability is so valuable, then why don't more people practice it? Well, in my interviews with survivors and my own journey through crisis, I've identified several common obstacles. Obstacle number 1, attachment to the old story. We all have stories about how our lives were supposed to go. When those stories are disrupted, we cling to them. I was supposed to retire from that company, or we were supposed to grow old together. I was supposed to be healthy. The attachment to what, quote, should have been makes things nearly impossible to adapt to what is. The antidote? Grieve the old story, then write a new one. Malala's old story was about being a schoolgirl activist in Swat Valley. Her new story became about being a global education advocate. Both stories honored her values, but the second one required letting go of the first. Obstacle number 2, fear of the unknown. Adaptation means stepping into uncertainty. Your old life, even if it's gone, is familiar. The possibilities are unknown and therefore scary. The new possibilities are unknown. So the antidote, reframe uncertainty as possibility. The unknown isn't just threatening, it's also full of potential. Malala had no idea what would come from her UN speech or her Nobel Prize. She stepped into that uncertainty anyway. Obstacle number 3. Sometimes we resist adapting because it feels like admitting we were wrong or that our old approach wasn't good enough. The antidote? Recognize that adaptation is wisdom, not weakness. The smartest people aren't the ones who never change course. They're the ones who adjust when circumstances demand it. Obstacle number 4 is a lack of practice. Like any skill, adaptability gets easier with practice. If you spent years being rigid or resistant to change, your adaptability muscles are weak. The antidote? Hey, start small. Practice adapting in low-stakes situations, like trying new foods or taking a different route to work, learning new skills, to build your flexibility for when high-stakes adaptations are required. From surviving to thriving. Malala didn't just survive the attack. She thrived in its aftermath, building a life and a legacy far beyond what seemed possible. That's the promise of adaptability. It's not just about getting through crisis. It's about discovering what becomes possible on the other side of adaptation. So when you embrace adaptability, you free yourself from the exhausting work of fighting reality. You can redirect that energy forward to build something new. You open yourself to possibilities you couldn't see before. Your crisis might close one door, but adaptability helps you notice the windows. You can develop confidence in your ability to handle future challenges. Each successful adaptation proves to yourself that you can navigate uncertainty. You can model resilience for others. Your willingness to adapt gives permission to others who are stuck. Malala's adaptability didn't just change her own life. It inspired millions of people around the world to believe that they too could adapt to their circumstances and continue pursuing what matters most. And your adaptability can do the same. Hey, maybe not on a global scale, but in the lives of the people around you who are watching you to see if it's possible to survive what you're going through. So, Malala today. As I write this, Malala is in her mid-20s. She graduated from Oxford University. She continues to run the Malala Fund, which has invested millions in education programs around the world. She advocates for refugee rights. She speaks to world leaders and uses her platform to amplify the voices of girls who still don't have access to education. She got married in 2021, a decision she openly discussed as another adaptation of her feminist values, redefining what marriage could mean rather than rejecting it outright. And remarkably, she's returned to Pakistan, not to live, but to visit. In 2018, 6 years after the attack, she made a brief trip home. It wasn't the homecoming she once imagined, but it was an adaptation that honored both her safety and her love for her homeland. This is what successful adaptation looks like. Not perfect, not without loss or grief, but moving forward with purpose, finding new ways to live your values when the old ways become impossible. So, navigating my own creek. I was 46 years old, sitting on my sofa in sweatpants, staring at a ceiling that had no answers. 6 months earlier, my wife and I had been running a multi-million-dollar mortgage, title, construction, and real estate holding operation. I had the corner office, and literally was in the corner of the building, even though we're on the first floor, right? We had a killer team of professionals, of staff, making things work smoothly, right? We had at least 24 investment properties. We had a mountain cabin. We had vehicles. And yes, we had an airplane. I was the guy who had figured it out. But then the cascading failures in the real estate and mortgage markets during that time, they triggered a collapse that I couldn't stop. And suddenly the guy who had figured it out couldn't figure out how to get off my sofa. Here's the thing. The empire was gone, but my identity was also gone. That's the part nobody tells you about in financial collapse. It's not really about the money. It's about who you thought you were. And when that money disappears, so does the guy you thought you were, or the girl you thought you were. Adaptability for me, though, it didn't arrive as a lightning bolt of inspiration. It arrived as a quiet, brutal question. Hey, who are you without all of that? Truthfully, the answer took years for me to find. But eventually, I discovered that skills, instincts, and relational gifts that had built the empire didn't disappear when the empire did. They just needed a new vehicle. That new vehicle became learning a whole new set of business, product creation, sales, and marketing skills. And then helping others navigate their own shit creeks. And then coaching. And then this book. So the empire was gone. But Ralph wasn't. Malala didn't stop being Malala when the Taliban shot her. She adapted her platform while protecting her purpose. And that's exactly what adaptability demands from all of us. Not the abandonment of who we are, but the willingness to find new ways to be exactly that. So, your turn. Here's the adaptability question. Whether you're reading this in the middle of your crisis or reflecting on what you've survived already, here's the question that changes everything. What would become possible if you stopped fighting your new reality and started adapting to it? Not accepting that it's good or fair or right, but just adapting to what is so that you can move forward with what matters. Malala couldn't change the fact that she was shot. She couldn't undo the attack or return to her old life unscathed, but she could choose how she responded to her new reality. And so can you. The first habit of Schitt Creek survivors is embracing adaptability, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way forward. So here are some key takeaways from this chapter and this habit. First, adaptability is flexibility, not surrender. It's about finding new paths when the old ones are blocked while staying true to your core values. Next, the most resilient people aren't the toughest. They're the most flexible. Research shows that cognitive flexibility predicts recovery from adversity better than stoicism or strength. Next, adaptability requires 3 beliefs. Your values remain even when your circumstances change. There's always more than one path forward, and adaptation is a strategy, not defeat. Common obstacles to adaptability include attachment to the old story, fear of the unknown, pride, and lack of practice. Malala's story teaches us that when your circumstances change irrevocably, you can either waste energy fighting reality or invest the energy in building something new. So here are a few reflection questions for you. Number 1, what aspects of your old life are you still trying to hold on to that may be keeping you stuck? Number 2, if you had to honor your core values in your current circumstances without trying to return to how things were, what would that look like? Number 3, what's one small adaptation you could make today that would help you move forward rather than staying stuck? Number 4, who in your life has successfully adapted to difficult circumstances? What can you learn from their example? And number 5, what story are you telling yourself about what your old life should have been, and what new story might be possible if you let go of that old one? So here's a few action steps for you. Today, identify one aspect of your situation you've been resisting or fighting. Write it down, and then complete the sentence. I can't change blah, that situation, but I can adapt by taking this specific step, this action. Okay? That's for today. Sometime this week, practice small adaptations. Try 3 new approaches to everyday tasks. Take, again, a different route to work. Arrange your morning routine. You could cook a meal you've never made before. Build your adaptability muscles with low-stakes practice. Sometime this month, identify your non-negotiable values. Make a list of what truly matters to you. Not your circumstances or goals, but your deepest values. And then brainstorm 3 new ways to honor each value in your current situation. Also this month, find an accountability partner. Share your biggest challenge with someone you trust and ask them to help you brainstorm alternative approaches when you get stuck in rigid thinking. And moving forward on an ongoing basis, keep an adaptations journal. Each time you successfully adapt to a changing circumstance, write it down. Note what you let go of, what you tried instead, and what resulted from that. This becomes evidence that you can handle uncertainty and change, evidence you can return to when the future challenges arise.
So listen, if this conversation found you at the right moment, you didn't stumble here by accident. Once again, this is Ralph Watkins, founder of the National Association of Schitt Creek Survivors and author of the 10 Habits of Schitt Creek Survivors, coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of East Tennessee. Hey, if you're still in the current, paddling hard and wondering if anyone else has been there, they have, and they made it, and so will you. I want to invite you to come find your tribe at NASCS.org. Take the 10 Habits assessment, get your personalized survival profile, and if you're ready to turn your own survival into service, explore the certified Schitt Creek Survivor Pathway. Your story isn't just yours. It's a lifeline for the person who's exactly 3 months behind where you are today. You can also connect with me directly at ralph@nascs.org. You can share your story, join the community, because no one else should have to paddle the creek without a compass. This is the Schitt Creek Survivor Podcast. Until next time, keep paddling.